So our next speaker is Dr. Savo. Dr. Savo is online. Okay. Is Dr. Savo online? I'm hoping he's going to be up in a second. So Dr. Savo Heleta is exploring international research collaboration between South Africa and the rest of the world, with a particular focus on a biometric analysis of the trends over the past decade. Dr. Savo works at the Durban University of Technology, and he is an author, researcher, and activist. And I encourage you to have a look at his bio. It's very interesting, all the different things that he is involved in. So, Dr. Savo, if you are up, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
I'm going to hand over to you, and we can hear you, and we were able to see you for a minute. We are having some challenges with load shedding. Yeah, good. So if something goes wrong, we will let you know. But over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping that my slides are visible. I am assuming that they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. I just wanted to very briefly mention that my colleague Divinia Jitu from Durban University of Technology, she couldn't be in today, but this is the research and the work that we are doing together. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that in the beginning. I have about 20 minutes, but I'm hoping that I can finish even before. So if there are any questions or comments or feedback that we can engage. Why this research, and why is it important and relevant? There's a lot of talk in South African higher education about transformation, about decolonization, about the slow pace of transformation, and a lot of it also has been at the forefront since 2015 and 2016, since the Rhodes Must Fall and Fees Must Fall student protests. And I'm one of the people who has written quite a lot on that. But we also started thinking about what are the pieces of research and data and evidence that can tell us a bit more about different aspects of transformation in South African higher education, and research is one of those. There's a lot of rhetoric in South African higher education at the universities, as well as in various policy documents, about importance of South-South collaboration, importance of intra-Africa collaboration, South Africa collaborating with the SADC region, with the continent, with the global South, and then also with the rest of the world. So we wanted to really get a sense and understand, where is South Africa as a country, and we're also doing a lot of work now on where is each of the public universities when it comes to their own international research collaboration trends. Very briefly, we also are looking back and trying to get a better sense of what was international research collaboration like during apartheid. It's a bit complicated because some of the data doesn't really exist and it's not digitized, but we're getting somewhere. There's a very important study that you can see on the screen that looked at international research collaboration between South Africa and the rest of the world between 1986 and 2015 and 2005, so 10 years, almost a decade before the end of apartheid, and then just over a decade after the end of apartheid. And that study looked at with whom are South African universities collaborating, or with whom they have been collaborating. And that study highlighted that international research collaboration became very prominent and expanded significantly after 1994. And of course, the academic boycotts and international sanctions during apartheid played a huge role in not allowing South African universities to collaborate with many parts of the world. But there was still some collaboration. So the key things to highlight that between 1986 and 2005, the large majority of collaboration in South Africa was with the countries in the global north, Western countries, primarily United States, Britain, Germany, then also countries like France, Australia, and basically the rest of European countries. As an example, just to highlight how unequal collaboration has been in the past between South Africa and the rest of the world, is an example where there was more collaboration with Australia than the entire African continent. So this, and there are some additional studies also that have been done that looked at post 2005 period. And so my colleague Divine and I wanted to really get a sense of what has been the trend over the past decade. And one of the also reasons why we wanted to look at that was, we've been coming across a lot of policy documents since 1994 that have been emphasizing the need for the expansion of collaboration between South Africa and the African continent and the global South. But what is very important is that all the policies also highlight that that should not come at the expense of collaboration with the rest of the world. So nobody is saying to South African universities, don't collaborate with your existing partners, or don't establish new partnerships with the rest of, with the global north. But we need, as South African universities, as a higher education system and institutions, we need to do far more with the region, the Southern African region, with the continent and the countries in the global South, because of politics and geopolitics of the past and inequalities of the past, that has been neglected deliberately. So we need to change that. So all the policies talk about that. So we wanted to see, is anybody in South African higher education really looking at those policies and doing what the policies suggest should be done? So yes, you can see on the screen also what we've been looking at. We looked at the past 10 years. We looked at the data from Scopus, bibliometric data, and we wanted to get a sense of. So we looked at the publication data and unpacking all the publications that have co-authors from South Africa and somewhere else in the world. So that was our highlight. And I'm just going to share some of the key findings that you can see here. We also looked at, South African scholarly output, and this has been a success story. Some previous research has highlighted that South African higher education is underfunded. If you consider the ideal, if you consider the commitment by the South African government, through the African Union and various other channels, to the idea is to spend 1% of the GDP on higher education research and development, but that's not the case. Up until today, that's not the case. So some of the previous studies have also compared South Africa with countries of similar size and similar size in terms of higher education and number of researchers. And South Africa is underfunded when it comes to higher education and research, but it's still producing significant amount of research. And you can see there that the number of publications, overall number of publications, is very significant. You can see very significant growth. You can also see that international research collaboration has been growing significantly over the years. So for the past decade, the proportion of international research collaboration out of the entire research output that we found in our study was 48%. And you can see how in 2012 that was at 42%. And in 2021, it's up to 54%. So this keeps growing. So basically, South African universities and academics and researchers see the importance of international research collaboration and spend a lot of time and work doing that. This graph shows you the top 20 countries and the trends with the top 20 countries that South Africa has been collaborating with. You can see that collaboration with the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, and Germany dominates. And you can see that over the past 10 years, there are no really significant changes at the top compared to the study that looked at South African research collaboration between 1986 and 2005. So despite all the policies and all the talk about the importance of transformation and various national priorities and importance of inter-Africa and South-South collaboration, we don't really see that here in this graph. But still, at the same time, what is important to mention is that collaboration with BRICS countries, other BRICS members, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, has been growing significantly. And those are the countries from the global south that you can see in this graph. And also another success story, the only success story when it comes to the African continent is, actually, let me just go back, is Nigeria. You cannot see it here on this map, on this graph, but Nigeria is the only country from the African continent that makes it into South Africa's top 20, and a lot of progress has been made when it comes to collaboration in Nigeria. And so the nature of bibliometric research is that we can see the trends, but the data itself doesn't tell us why are certain things happening. So we are hoping that others or we will be able to do some more research on what has been driving the success in expanding collaboration with Nigeria, and to see how that can be replicated with other African countries. I think that will be very important. This graph shows you the overall numbers of collaborations between South Africa and the countries in top 20. You can again see the dominance of the collaboration between the United States, United Kingdom, South Africa, Australia, Germany overshadows most other collaboration. But you can see there, as I mentioned earlier, you can see Nigeria, you can see the BRICS countries as well. So I would say, this top 20 tells us that, there have been some very, very slow movements in the system, but there's still a lot that needs to happen, that needs to change. This graph, I will make the slides available, and our paper is also open access, so people will be able to access this and read about this in more detail. This graph shows South Africa's collaboration with top, I think, African countries in top 100. As I mentioned earlier, you can see significant improvements when it comes to collaboration with Nigeria, and some small improvements when it comes to collaboration with Kenya. But for most other African countries, including the neighbors, South Africa's neighbors, there's very little movement. And so this is something that we need to talk about, we need to unpack, and we need to ask very important, difficult questions. And I think some of these difficult questions are very appropriate for this conference and its theme. Just very briefly, these graphs also. So we also in our research wanted to see, let's do some comparisons between different parts of the world. And so on your left, you can see comparisons between South Africa collaborating with the global north and the global south. There's still a huge gap between there's a lot of still significant prioritization of collaboration with the global north and neglect of much of the rest of the world, the global south and the African continent. I think it's a significant issue to have South Africa geographically part of the African continent, but only 13% of collaboration between South African public universities and the rest of the African continent over the past decade. We need to ask these important, difficult questions and ask, why is this still happening? We need to ask university leaders, we need to ask research officers, we need to ask academics. A lot of people have to answer what is happening and why are things the way they are. I'm not going to go into too much detail when it comes to the other the graph or the two graphs on the left, but you can see the African continent is far behind, for example, definitely European Union, but also United States, the BRICS countries as well. So yeah, a lot of I think the findings that we're presenting are also presenting a lot of food for thought and I think questions, and I think different people in different positions in South African higher education, including the government, need to need to start thinking about this and ask themselves questions. Why is the picture the way it is? Why is there such slow pace of change when it comes to where South Africa is now and where it was 20, 30 years ago? Should the change be a bit different than what it is now? Just very briefly, so that is the published research that we have done. We have just completed our second paper using the same Scopus data, well, similar data, and looking at institutional international research collaboration between South African public universities and the rest of the world. This is currently under peer review. I just wanted to share just a snapshot of what we are finding. You can see the institutions, and I hope people from all these institutions are in the audience, and when the paper is published, hopefully soon, we'll engage on this in more detail. But you can see how South African public higher education system continues to be highly unequal, and the inequality. I'll show you the inequalities in the second in the next slide. But this slide shows you that there are massive differences in priorities when it comes to research and research collaboration between different universities, particularly between historically white and historically Black universities. For historically Black universities, engagement with the African continent and other parts of the world is very important. And you can see most institutions on the bottom do a better job when it comes to balancing collaboration with the different parts of the world. So when you talk about epistemic plurality, research plurality, apologies for that, you can see far more of that on the bottom. And I think as universities that are claiming to be, these whatever universities in South Africa are saying, dynamic African universities, leading African universities, you can see that far more from the universities at the bottom of the graph, and you'd see very little from the universities on top. For example, University of Cape Town, University of Johannesburg, Rhodes University, WITS, their collaboration with the African continent doesn't go beyond 6-7% over the past 10 years. And these are very important questions that we need to ask of these institutions. But as I say, they're far more, the picture is actually far more complex because also, we have to take into consideration that the universities that are on top of this graph produce far more research, and so even though University of Cape Town produces does significantly less when it comes to collaboration with the African continent, in terms of their overall research output and international collaboration, the capacity that the university has means that they do a lot more research than most other universities. So basically, the 6.5% of UCT's collaboration with the African continent is more than the overall collaboration with the entire world for most universities on the bottom of this graph. So I'm hoping I'm making sense of this. In our paper, we actually spent a lot of time unpacking that and showing this complexity that, just looking at the percentages doesn't tell us the full story. So a picture can tell us a number of stories. It highlights complexities. But I just wanted to highlight the still deep inequalities in the South African higher education system. So when you take
Dr. Savo,
figures,
sorry, you've
yes.
got 2 minutes. You've got 2 minutes left. Thanks.
Yes, I will finish. This is almost the end of my slides. So this is the picture in terms of who is collaborating with the rest of the world and who is producing collaborative research with the rest of the world of the past 10 years. So historically white universities, the 6 historically white universities are producing 57, almost 58%, while historically Black universities are producing only 7.4%. There are huge inequalities when it comes to the capacity to do research. These findings are very similar to the data from the Department of Higher Education and Training in terms of the research output and the publication units and all that. So our second paper that we have just completed recently shows us that there's still a long way to go to bring some level of equity into the system. I'm not going to talk about the key highlights, but I just wanted to mention here that there's still a very long way to go for South African universities to contribute to the country's transformation, and part of that transformation is engaging with the world, and not only a few European countries, Australia and the United States. There's still a very long way to go. Some of the key highlights that we have in our paper are that Department of Higher Education and Training, they do a lot of reporting on research output in South Africa, but they don't touch the trends in international research collaboration. So how can you know where you are as a system and what the universities are doing, and how you can bring about change if necessary if you don't track this at all? So this is one of our suggestions to Department of Higher Education and Training. But also universities need to track and analyze their international research collaboration trends. And I'm hoping people from research offices are in the audience, because we only found, we did this late last year, and so we looked at all annual research reports from South African public universities, and we only found 2 universities to somewhat touch on the international research collaboration trends. The other universities don't do anything, don't even touch it. So how can you know where you are and where you need to go, and how you can contribute to achieving some of national priorities and some of your own priorities that you keep talking about, through your visions and missions and all that, if you don't know what your trends are, what your annual trends are, and where you're doing well, where you need to do more. Universities have a responsibility to do this. And I just wanted to also say, we have librarians in the room. I know that at Durban University of Technology, librarians offer training on how to use, for example, Scopus, and how to do this similar analysis. So there is capacity in the system, there is capacity at universities, and we need to do a better job to use that internal capacity, and also find capacity from other institutions to be able to do this as institutions, as faculties, as departments, to know where we are, what we are doing, and how we can improve things. So that's really what I wanted to speak about here, and I'm hoping that some of it will be useful for discussions.
Dr. Heleta, let's give him a round of applause.